Let me sort of rephrase the question slightly in the sense that it's partly about creativity, but I like to think about it less as the creativity and more about the humanity. You know, ultimately, ad tech and all the data and all the technology that we're playing with have a role to play in what's a much bigger marketing ecosystem. You know, with many challenges and many opportunities which are all interlinked with each other. I think what's interesting is that actually the fundamental problem of marketing has never changed. Actually, with all the proliferation of technologies and ideas, the fundamental challenge has still never changed, which is brands and companies trying to engage with people to try and generate some sort of an outcome. And I think creativity plays a really important role in that because that's what people are really engaging with. It's an idea, it's something that maybe challenges them or that draws them in or something like that. And creative plays such a fundamental role in that. I would argue sometimes actually more than the media itself. What's interesting about all the technology is that it creates new ways of engaging with the creative side of the industry as well in terms of how we tell stories and other things. And I think, you know, I'm definitely starting to see the creative agencies within WPP engaging more also with Xaxis, trying to understand how the technologies can work. They're employing some of their own technologists as well. So people that we can talk to and have an educated conversation about the possibilities that technology create or provide for creativity. And what they're trying to do is engage with us very early on in the planning process. You know, not even before the creative is done and produced, but while the concepts are come up with, while the strategy is being developed. You know, how can we actually inform the entire marketing communication strategy by understanding the possibilities that technology and data provide right at the start as one of the inputs into that process. And I'm not talking about just the data that comes from how creatives have performed before and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that's always been there, but you know, the data around audience segments, you know, what people are doing online, how we're defining those segments, how we're creating those segments, how we're actioning those segments, targeting those segments, and how we're telling stories. I think that's actually the next evolution of this whole industry, and it's a very exciting one because it really puts the pieces back together again.
Casper, let's talk a little bit, we've been talking about the Internet of Things, we've been talking about total addressable market, we've been sort of talking about, you know, this sort of ad tech engine that's been built, maybe to embrace more than just, you know, a display ad or a 30-second video. You know, what are your thoughts about sort of the impact of digital media beyond media, perhaps, if you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's very tricky. You know, I suppose, I mean, that Internet of Things does a couple of things. It has a couple of impacts on our industry. First of all, no doubt it's going to be an amazing source of data for us. You know, data we haven't even thought about yet or conceptualized yet. Obviously, there's a very interesting privacy element to that. As those devices start to enter our everyday lives, they start to become integrated with things which are very personal to us. You know, I mean, our mobile device is an obvious example of that, but you know, many more things which sit in our homes and, you know, travel with us in our cars and other things. So, you know, I think there's an interesting data angle, but one that's juxtaposed with a very obvious privacy question as well, one we have to take great care with, you know, one where we have to be very cognizant of how people will react to it. But I think interesting nevertheless. I think in terms of the actual reaching of audiences across those platforms, I think it's going to be difficult, certainly initially, because of course, you know, one of the fundamental tenets of ad tech, in a sense, is the standardization of things like formats and other things, just to create scale. You know, and as soon as you have a very fragmented delivery platform, which you inevitably will do with the Internet of Things, it's going to be, you know, it's hard to see how that scales quickly. But certainly in terms of data, I think there's an interesting element to it.
And finally, Casper, tell us a little bit about what you see some of the big things happening here, or what you expect to happen, and maybe where Xaxis stands in this transitionary period. What's happening, and where do you see things going?
Sure. Well, I mean, so I guess two answers to that question. What do I expect to see here at DMEXCO? It's always a fun place to be. It's a very different conference to all the other things which we sort of tend to go to across the year. It's sort of, I like to think of it as the opposite of a conference, in the sense that, you know, you've got exhibitors in the middle and the conference happens around the edges, which is the exact opposite of what you normally see, I suppose. But I've only just got here 10 minutes ago, so I don't know what to expect yet, other than the fact that it's bigger than last year, which is daunting. For Xaxis this year, you know, we've gone through a big transition this year. We've merged with 24/7, we've made our first acquisition with Banner Connect. You know, we're really making the transition to being an audience supplier of audiences. So for the first time this year, we're here more as almost a supplier than as a buyer. But looking forward to a good conference. I think it'll be good fun.